Sending money back home was a life or death situation.
In 2016, we will have record-breaking numbers on fraud.
That had the highest remittance costs of anywhere in the world, something around 9%, 10%. That's a tax on hardworking people. The blockchain is enabling the movement of money at a percent of a cent as a gas fee.
What Zuba Mission is?
At Zuba, we're building the world's most reliable bank.
I don't know anything about bank. I never tried it. So let's go work for banks.
Stablecoins has fundamentally, in my opinion, changed the cost basis of transactions.
There is nothing free in this world, unfortunately. Who is paying? Tell me. Hello, dear friends and family. I'm Victor Orlovski, and we have a next episode of a podcast, Ventures from the Valley, brought to you by R136 Ventures. And I have an amazing man, a friend, and an amazing founder, Josiah Senu, who joined us from Mexico now. But he's a truly international man, and you will learn why. Josiah, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Victor. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm grateful and honored that I get to share this time with you. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So we will start, and Josiah is the founder of Zuba, the company I'm a small angel investor in, proudly. We start with a region, right? So you are born in Nigerian family of immigrants, suburb of London. So you were raised in London. You actually have a great international experience, and we will come to that later. But I would like to start with what did you learn about Africa overall when you were a kid? And what was true about that, and what was a misconception? So maybe we can start with that. So, what's your kids' memory? What you were what you learned about Africa wasn't right assumption in a way.
I love it. It's a great question. So, I mean, I guess I describe myself as British-Nigerian. I grew up in England. My parents were Nigerian, but I was born in Gabon, and then moved from Gabon to Germany, and then Germany to the UK. And I spent some time in Africa in my early childhood, visiting my dad's adopted mother, and I think what's interesting about sort of growing up with two different heritages at the same time is that you sort of dip your toes in both worlds and in different worlds, and you have an appreciation of different cultures and ways of being that others don't have. So, I mean, my family in general is very energetic and enthusiastic. They're quite bubbly about the world, right? Quite loud, very communal, very community based, and you don't have quite the same growing up in Europe, in Germany or the UK. People tend to stick to themselves. You're not going to get a random conversation in the bus or in the store as much. Whereas in Africa, it's abundant. It's all around you. Though there are differences, right? So, the Gabonese, I would say, are much more calm and very much more relaxed. The Francophones speaking culture sitting there, whereas the Nigerians are loud and proud. And, you're going to know when they're in the room, which is very different from how it was, hanging around with the Germans, right? Who are very direct and to the point, or hanging around with the British, who have a good bit of dry sarcasm, but not sometimes don't necessarily tell you how they truly feel about something. So, honestly, navigating and traversing the different planes of cultures, places, was challenging as a young adult, as a young man, as a child, just trying to understand and fit in a particular area.
Well, and what was the misconception? What did you learn was not true when you were a kid? Okay, you thought that this is A and it appeared to be B. If you can just remember a few things. And it would be interesting to know your kids what Africa is ABC, and then it's appeared to be. And I understand that Africa is big, right? Okay, Nigeria ABC, and then when you just started doing business, it's appeared to be different.
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. So the first thing I would say is that often the narratives around Africa, and more specifically Nigeria, is that it's a place of extreme poverty, not a lot of great activity that happens, economic activity. The people are less talented, less capable, and I just don't think that's true. Talent is evenly distributed. It simply needs the time, energy to flourish, and the right education to give it its resources. And I would say a big misconception is that you can't find great talent in Africa, that you can't find great resources, you can't find great opportunities. That's all been completely proven to be incorrect, at least from the time that I've spent there. I think there's also this sense, in my opinion, that actually Africa and Africans are quite creative people, largely because of a lot of things which are broken. So less focus rather should happen on all the things which are unpalatable, like political risk and the corruption and all those things that exist, and rather more focus on should be put on the creativity of how do you make things work in an environment and a place where things don't work, right? Like electricity isn't happening, isn't there full time all the time, 24 hours. When the local grid goes down, what do you do? How do you create systems to overcome and sort of sidestep that so your business can still operate, or access to good water? You think that these things are taken for granted in everyday life when you're living in Europe and North America, and actually there's a lot of creativity I think that happens on the continent aside from that. And I think probably another misconception about Africa is that you can't generate, and this is probably something later, is that you can't generate meaningful returns from the continent. I think you can. I just think you sort of need the right ingredients and the right maturity to make it happen. And I can be more specific about what that means, but I at least that's the thesis that I have, and sort of part of the reason why I started in Africa with Zuba.
Mm-hmm. And maybe just to complete the story about Africa, and I know that Zuba is not all about Africa, but that's a rare opportunity to have an insider who knows a lot about Nigeria in Africa overall. So speaking precisely about Nigeria is, I think, far the largest economy in Africa, right? Outperforming South Africa, Egypt, and many others. Also by population, it's one of the largest countries in the world. And I think by 2050 will be one of 3 or 4 largest in the world by the birth rate. And fortunately, survival rate for childs now is improving. So it might be like amazingly big country with exceptional opportunity, right? So if you may give an advice to people who like startuppers who want to consider Nigeria as a market, especially financial services. I don't want to open all the secrets, but at least need some guidance. So I have a bunch of startuppers who are probably this podcast viewers as well, who will ask a question. Josiah, how to get in? What should I learn, to be in Africa successful and to prosper in Nigeria in particular?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you got to be in Africa. You got to be in Nigeria. Go to Nigeria. I think, like any business in the world that you build, you have to be present in that geography in order to build successfully in that geography. You have to understand the way that people behave. You have to understand the cultural nuances, the differences. I think that's the number one thing, is go there. Then spend time listening. Listen to the challenges, listen to the problems, understand those problems deeply, and then try to build and provide solutions around them. I'll give you a small example of what that looks like, right? So for a lot of people in Nigeria, I don't have access to a lot of internet data, right? So, when it comes to plans that they've got, they can only spend a small amount on that. And, they have access to a smartphone, and that smartphone will have apps, right? And those apps, right, if you think about, large apps, it can be up to a gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, 500 megabytes, whatever it is. If you're a local Nigerian, for example, you're going to think very carefully about spending a gigabyte worth of data just to download an app app to access a
Mm-hmm.
particular service, right? So when you're building an app um, in that market, you're thinking about, well, what are the constraints associated with it? I probably have to make it super light, right? Most people don't have access to a computer, for example, right? Most people might not have access to the app store. So maybe actually it's a mobile-based, web-based app that I need to focus on and build, right? And now you're thinking a lot more about your user specifically and what you're building for that user and how to navigate the constraints associated with that. Like when you think about how much money does my customer have to spend on a software product or a financial services product. You have to think about where that spend goes to, right? Like what are people doing on a day-to-day basis? If you think of a business like MoneyPoint, which is doing over 500 million in revenue in Nigeria, right? Like they thought very carefully about how to aggregate demand, how to make sure the point of sale service worked, how to build up agency banking in order to provide material value to the end customer. It's about thinking through the user. So is there opportunity? Like you've already given all the statistics. I don't need to rehash that, Victor, right? But like, what is like so key that a lot of people get wrong is that you just go take a plane, go to Lagos, spend time in Lagos, in Ikeja and in Alaba International Market and all these places. You're going to feel the energy. And Nigeria is a great place. The people are energetic, they're enthusiastic, they want to build.
So if I want to like find talent in Nigeria, where would I go? What's your advice? Which college, university? Are there any good companies I can basically hunt my first employees from? Give an
For sure.
advice.
For sure. So if you look at probably fintech is probably the strongest industry that exists today in Nigeria when it comes to the tech startup scene. And there are a number of successful ones. I think, your Money Points of the world, your Flutterwaves of the world, your Kudas, your Palm Pays. There's quite a few that are mature, Piggyvest, and then you've got, smaller companies, Mono that just got acquired by Flutterwave, and like so many more. And like the startup ecosystem is great for finding that young, rich, hungry, motivated talent. What you'll notice actually, there's a bunch of hacker houses all around Lagos where you got like a bunch of engineers who are camped in these apartments that are hosted out, and people are building things away, trying to innovate and create for the local markets. Referrals, right? Like who do you know who's built in a certain ecosystem, who can refer you, connect you with great people. All of that really plays a huge advantage. I would actually think, in terms of universities, that some of the best universities, it's sort of locally. I would actually spend less time focusing on that. I never actually find that universities or credentials necessarily lead to the best hires. I think try to take a look at like what that person has done. If they're an engineer, what have they built? What have they created? What are the constraints associated with that? Where did they used to work? What did their manager say about them? Like you're going to find more depth of quality in there rather than necessarily focusing on, this person got a first from Obafemi Awolowo University, right? Like that's not going to, I don't think necessarily lead you to a great outcome.
Okay, good. Thank you. So let's switch gears. You started in high school, in a school, elementary, middle, high, whatever, in the UK, and then you had both like university degrees in the UK and in the US. So how would you compare education? My personal view is like the entire education is broken, although I'm going to attend a summer executive program in 2 days at Stanford. After many years, I finally decided to spend like few months and like deep studying and taking myself away from business. Yet, what if you think like what's bad about the UK versus the US, and what's the bad about the US versus the UK? And sorry for putting it that way because I consider it broken. And we will switch then gears to fintech, which is also broken, and you will need to explain that in your own words as well.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's like I actually really appreciated that the differences in both education systems. I got a lot out of it. Like my background is quite different to a lot of people, right? Like I didn't go to a private school in the UK. I went to a state comprehensive. It was actually one of the worst performing state comprehensives in the UK. It was a national documentary on how bad it was. And then I ended up going to the LSE to go study law, and like
Yeah.
that was quite formative for me. I think what I valued from the British education system was this rigor, this intellectual rigor, right? Like it was really focused on the details, right? And as a lawyer, details are everything, right? Like that's what I studied, right? So when you're in front of a judge and you're making an argument, right, you got to make sure that you know exactly what you're talking about and be prepared. I think like law school gave me this immense preparation in the UK. And sort of when I went to the US and I was at Harvard Law School, like I was actually surprised at how unrigorous it was, right? Like it was completely not in the details, completely fugate. I thought to myself, I'm going to, the premier institution in the world in relation to what I'm studying. And like, why do I find it incredibly easy, right? Like I did not find it hard at all. But there was a flip side that I got from the American education system that I didn't get from the UK education system, was this encouragement to be ambitious. Think beyond where you are, go and build stuff, go and make stuff.
American dream.
The American dream, right? Like it was like the first time that I've had this like spiritual awakening on the inside of the things that you can go build and go create and go make. And I spent all of my time at the innovation lab at Harvard and doing computer science courses with David Milan than I did actually doing my law course and reading constitutional law. I found it interesting, but actually, the idea of creating value in the world was far more exciting for me. And I think that's the difference in the education system. It's probably, at least at that level, I felt like, the UK had more rigor, more specialism. The US was far more broad, far more interested in you being a more rounded person. Of course, I'm sure that these institutions, and I felt it, you feel it when you speak to the wider community, that people are incredibly talented, incredibly gifted across both domains. Here we're talking about relative differences in principles between these two geographies. But I guess if you had to tell me what's broken, I would say, in America, let's get into the details a little bit more. In the UK, let's be a little bit more ambitious.
Okay. Nice answer as always. A trained lawyer who were supposed to be in one of the top tier after Harvard, probably top tier legal firms, decided to become a fintech founder. But you also started first, from what I remember, at Taya, right? As an employee. And why was it Taya? Why you decided to dedicate your life to fintech? Did it just happen? Serendipity, right? You just found like something cool, or you had like a long-term kind of obsession with fintech? Because when we met, I was really impressed by your pitch, and that was also the reason why I decided to put some money, as it was like amazing story, like very personal story of why you do this, right? And I was always trying to find like in early stage deals, an obsession with the problem rather than just the solution. And what was the obsession after such a successful um, path in your career of lawyer? Like becoming a lawyer became something not interesting for you, and why fintech?
I think it's a great question. There's a lot wrapped up into that, Victor. To be honest, I'm trying to think about where do I start with the answer to this question. I think, like, let's say the first pull into fintech really came from one of my best friends at university, who looked at sort of what I was doing and sort of said, "You're not ambitious enough. You don't think about the problems in the world at a large enough scale." And that pulled me into the orbit of the founders of StoneCo in Brazil. So that was Andre Street, Eduardo Pontes, and they basically built this merchant acquiring business that did point of sale systems out in Brazil for SMBs. Which listed on the NASDAQ for $30 billion. Was Warren Buffett's first ever tech investment, and the first time Berkshire Hathaway had ever anchored an IPO. And these founders were on a mission that just resonated with me, especially because of my background. And they sort of said, "Josiah, we're going to go to Europe and we're going to go build an equivalent business for the SMEs across Europe." And here I was, leaving Harvard Law School and joining them as an early employee number 12, on this thing that I just didn't have a real understanding or conception of at the time. 3.5 years later, we built a $10 billion business across 25 countries, hundreds of millions in revenue, over 300,000 customers. And I learned so much from that time spent, right? Like going from merchant to merchant, and really that person in the shop, right, is an immigrant.
Mhm.
Like they are,
Mhm.
somebody who's trying to make ends meet for
Yeah.
their family, and they're just trying to,
Mhm.
and I saw my family in that story, right? And the vision of going against the big banks who are ripping off those SMEs, it felt like I was married to something which felt good at heart, and then I was putting my energy and learning about something which was bigger than me, right, and touched so many people's lives. And like, to draw it back, like, why is it so visceral for me personally, right? Like, um, my business today is focused on cross-border payments, right?
Mhm.
I'm an immigrant myself, and my parents are immigrants. And one of the things that immigrants do is they send money back home, right? And I had a particular situation in my family where sending money back home was a life or death situation. Either my uncle, dies, or he lives, and that money needs to get sent across. And you rely on intermediaries, in this case, like Western Union, in order to send that money across. And when the money doesn't land, it actually has real big consequences, right? And that's separate from, let's say, the classic story of sending medical fees or school fees or whatever it is, right? That's something that was visceral for me, that I felt, right? So when I build the company and when I'm doing what I'm doing, it's like there's like several orders of magnitude that I'm interfacing with, right? There's like the base visceral level of, like, why does the money land? Why is it so expensive? This makes no sense. How are you helping immigrants? How are you helping people who are trying to make ends meet, contributing to the economy? Then there's like the other level of, like, wow, like the intellectual difficulty that, like, of the complexity associated with moving money. Like, wow, like, why do you need so many parties? Why are there so many sort of payment protocols involved? Like, how do you simplify that? How does regulation affect that? I mean, with my background as a lawyer, it was a natural way to just get excited about what was going on, right? And then, of course, like the feeling of a startup, and working with people who are like-minded, who were experienced, who knew what they were doing to go and build it. So when you tie all of those things together, I kind of think it was like a almost preordained that I would end up in this space. I actually tried to run away from fintech at one point, when I was building in SF, but I just got pulled back in. So like, it's almost like I can't escape it. This is my story. This is, I guess, what I was brought to Earth to do.
That's amazing. And actually, it reminds me my story because I was like an engineer when I started working, and I had a bunch of back in Uzbekistan was a bunch of offers. One from Procter and Gamble, another was I think from Coca-Cola, and the third one was from a bank. So I have chosen bank because that was the list I knew about. I thought, okay, I drank Coca-Cola. I just bought some Procter and Gamble products. I have a clue of what it is, but I never tried banking because, frankly, like even like being like already post teenage, like 20s, I didn't have a bank account yet. As I mean, I didn't need it, so I was okay. I don't know anything about bank. I never tried it, so let's go like work for banks, and that's how I decided, and how that would just like build my destiny in a way and legacy. So anyways, that's funny. So let's get back. Let's get now on Zuba, your baby. So first, you already said it's cross-border payments. If you can give a little bit of deep dive of what Zuba Mission is and how you're gonna build upon this mission. And I'm curious, why Zuba? What is it? What is it for? Like, I mean, why Zuba? I like the name, by the way, but I don't know what is it. Oh, or maybe you told me and I forgot. But tell us.
No, absolutely. So, um, at Zuba, we're building the world's most reliable bank. And we started out in the emerging markets because we felt that one of the core foundational problems with um, banking services was payments, especially payments into the emerging markets and out of the emerging markets. And the sort of the geography that we started with was Africa, because that had the highest remittance costs of anywhere in the world, something around 9%, 10%. And the friction associated with settlement sometimes could be 7 days, 14 days. Um, and the name Zuba really comes out of our African origin, really, which is Zuba means sunlight in Shona.
Hmm.
And I kind of felt there was time to bring sun and energy back to the world of payments, right? a completely underserved, overlooked, downcast world in the emerging markets, and bring the energy of Africa to the rest of the world. Bring the energy of who I. I think when most people meet me as well, they'd probably say that I'm someone who's got loads of energy and loads of enthusiasm.
Amazing. I totally support that. Agree. I mean, personally, you are like a shining man for sure.
That's very kind, very, very kind. I appreciate that. And so I kind of wanted something, that was authentic, right? And so Zuba felt authentic, especially being, Nigerian, Gabonese. It just made sense. Also, it's a four-letter name with a .com associated with that. So there are also consequential benefits associated with that. But I guess all of that just ties to our mission, right? It ties to like what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to do three things, really. And I think honestly, it's really that simple. Number one, make sure money moves at an affordable cost, right? For all parties involved, right? Ideally, it's free, in my view. The second is make sure it moves fast. So make sure it actually happens as quickly as possible. In many ways, instantaneous settlement. If the alternative is cash, the movement of cash is instantaneous, right? When someone has it. So how do we make sure at a digital level, we pretty much have the same experience?
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing, I think, is reliability, right? Which is, I think, the core product of what we have, which is when you send that money at the affordable cost, you want to make sure that it actually arrives at the destination that you expect it to. So, the challenges associated with fraud or the challenges associated with convenience and risk and compliance, that's core and a foundational part of the product. So when I think about like, what are we trying to do? Like, it's really those three things. Like, it's super simple.
So it's free, instant, and reliable. Let's deep dive into free, right? I mean, there is nothing free in this world, unfortunately. Who is paying? Tell me.
Yeah, so this is the one of the most interesting questions I think that exists today, right? Like, who is paying? Today it's the customer paying, which is completely unfair, and like, I don't think that world should exist anymore, right? Because the way I see it is that that's a tax on hardworking people, because the people who pay the tax, it's the SME owner, right? It's the SME owner who's an immigrant who has to send money back home.
Yeah.
That's who's paying the tax. That doesn't feel unfair, especially because they get taxed anyway, right? There's so many tax. There's so much tax. Now, when I engage with that philosophically, someone's got to pay, right? Like you said, right? Somebody's got to pay, because moving money is expensive, right? There's costs along the way. Stablecoins has fundamentally, in my opinion, changed the cost basis of transactions. Because what's happening is the blockchain is enabling the movement of money at a percent of a cent as a gas fee. So the cost of moving a tokenized currency is almost negligible, right? Like, it only really matters at like some extreme scale, but really it doesn't matter anymore. So if you move the financial system on this new protocol or rail, stablecoins, and that's how I see it, by the way. I see it as a protocol or a rail. Then what you've done is that you've enabled instantaneous, almost free transactions, right? It's pretty much free if you think about it, right? Like, if we move money and we use a stablecoin as a sandwich mechanism to do it, we're not, it's pretty much free. The costs that you incur are when you on and off ramp, right? So when you convert a fiat currency into stablecoins and vice versa. And eventually those on and off ramp costs are also going to fundamentally decline. We're seeing the movement at a regulatory level, right? Of, is a stablecoin money? Is it EMD? What does a tax basis look like for it? I think the direction of travel is that we're gonna get there, or at least the on and off ramp providers are going to return the cost to zero, because there's going to be no accrued benefit from doing anything other than that, right? Especially at volume and scale. So I think the world of free is pretty much coming. Maybe some people might make some money along the way to zero, but it's not me. It's just basic demand.
But are you also providing off-ramp, on-ramp service, or only moving money? So if you do, like, if you control the whole like value chain, you can at the end do off-ramp and on-ramp free. knowing where else we can make money, right?
Yeah, exactly. So again, why do we say we want to be the world's most reliable bank? Like, what's the story behind that? What's the mentality? I think there's a lot of players out there who are like stablecoin native orchestrators or whatever. Like with all due respect, I don't think that's where the world is going. I think what matters more is kind of what Revolut has done, right? Which is own the customer relationship. Be as close to the customer as possible, because if you are close to the customer, you get to meet their needs, right? Like, and infrastructure, right, and payments infrastructure, it's just a part of the prerequisite, the basic requirements that you need in order for the customer to perform a particular activity, right? So yes, today we offer on and off ramp because that's the way the world looks like today, right? And we got to meet our clients' needs where they are. But tomorrow, our customer is going to want to do more than on and off ramp. They're probably going to want to hold a tokenized deposit. They're probably going to want to have a yield against that deposit. They're probably going to want to invest that money. They're probably going to want to get access to credit. And our job as a banking platform, as a business, is to make sure we enable that business or that consumer to grow, right? To grow their wealth. And the way I see us is that we are in the business of growing wealth, and actually for the most underserved community in the world, which will be the most powerful economic force in the next 100 years.
And I understood that the solution for fast and instant and for free is stablecoin, which I very much agree with, and we are big believers in stablecoins as well. What about like reliability? How do you make sure that that's reliable? And fraud is like inevitably going to grow in the financial world, I believe, and I'm looking for like a solution. I'm scared. You must be scared too, right? I mean, I'm looking for a solution in the US that would solve my my vision, like my problem, and like in envisioning the huge fraud wave with all this AI and stuff, right? So, what's your rails to prevent fraud and be 100% reliable? What's that? If you can just deep dive a little bit on that, because I mean, you constantly say we are building most reliable banks. I think 10 years ago, reliability was less of a problem. Now, I believe my prediction is in 2016 we will have record-breaking numbers on fraud in the US. I mean, in the world overall, but it will be like only beginning, unfortunately, of the wave of fraud, which will definitely come into financial world very soon. And I think banks have no solution to that. At least the solution which I, as engineer, wanted to be, right?
For sure. And I think the way I think about reliability is definitely on a broad spectrum. Like, and there are different, again, orders of magnitude and layers, right? So, like, for me, reliability extends from the very moment that you engage with Zuba as a customer, right? So the very moment we have that first interaction with you, how do we make you feel, right? That moment, how quickly do we onboard you? How quickly do we give you that premier service? And then, how do we make sure that when you get your first transaction, you have that wow moment of like, this was an easy experience, all the way to that moment where something bad, like where something, you want to grow your business. And then there's the moment where something bad happens, right? Because that always happens, right? Like that you can't sometimes escape it, where something bad happens. And what do you want? You want someone to be there for you, to have a conversation with you, to take care of you, to make sure your handheld. And today in the age of AI, that doesn't happen, right? You get put to some form of AI agent, and real people don't want that. They want real human service. So for the first thing for me is like, let's just be human about our interactions and recognize that on some level, right? Reliability means being there for someone. Now, what does it mean on a technical level, right? What does it mean in terms of, I guess, as an engineer, how do I prevent fraud? The reality is that you're going to have to get AI to fight AI, right? Like that's where we're at, right? And then there's about the way that the blockchain can help with cryptographic security, quantum resistance, privacy preserving technology. There's things that we can say on the blockchain, and I think that's probably what the acceleration in quality of technology enables us to do, is that the blockchain enables us to do things that we probably couldn't do as well in the fiat world, that creates a more secure ledger, and that ledger being the principal form of activity that we're able to dictate relationships between different counterparties, right? When the cryptographic hash is the layer of trust that exists, then the reliability can be a lot stronger than you might ordinarily see today. So on an engineering level, we today are building out a lot of complex systems, thinking around like where the future is going to be and how you battle that on a cryptographic level. And then also balancing, to be honest, the thing that we think our customer cares about, which is like, even when something goes wrong, who's there?
Good. Well, amazing. So let's continue to speak about Zuba for a moment. You mentioned Western Union. Western Union was established back in 1800s, and guess what? They were sending and receiving cash, right? That's what they're doing for almost 100, maybe 60 years now, maybe 180 years, I don't know exactly, but for long. And doing more or less the same technology. Oh, I don't want to exaggerate it. They still like a little bit better than was 200 years ago. Now they have a whole bunch of like mainframes and stuff. But you also have quite competitive edge with like Stripe, PayPal's Pioneer, which is like amazing Israeli company in payments, and bunch of smaller competitors. So it's very crowded. But on top of that, why Western Union exists for 200 years? Just because payments have what is called strong network effect, right? When once you are there, like in at scale, it's really hard to break this strong network effect, how they call it. So what's your answer? Why Zuba? And do you see all these like pioneers and PayPal's and Stripes of this world? Probably Western Union might be a victim for Zuba, but how you see others who are very technologically advanced? And we know that Stripe is doubling down on stable coins as well, right? And they're really deep in this, but not only them, right? So why Zuba may still thrive and build something, and how do you like think of like your competitive edge versus those like top tier tech payment companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're living in a fortuitous moment in history. Very much like in AI, where you're seeing a lot of builders come into the space and it grow. I think stablecoins is generating the same level of activity because I think it is a fundamental technology which is going to change the world. And I think what we have that the other players don't have is that we're building with clay at that time where actually it's very wet. And that's pretty exciting for us. So being stablecoin native means that we get to do unique things, like say stablecoin pre-funding, right? And that means our ability to scale products in multiple places in the world. Having stablecoins as float management means optimized treasury, lower requirements. Having stablecoins means access to larger amounts of liquidity on a transaction level settlement. Like the native element of what we're building and the regulatory arbitrage that is created as a result is a unique proposition in time that allows us to do stuff that other counterparties don't have. The second thing is that it enables us to go into markets which are traditionally underserved and be able to scale, combining AI and the blockchain. That means that we can go to Africa today, spin up a product, create massive volumes, grow a business, and do it in a way and a scale that has that sense of speed, right? And it's just a speed that the larger whales just can't compete with. They just can't compete with our ability to execute. Unless they devote their entire organization's resources to it. And even then, you've got it takes 12 months to release a product or 15 months to release a product. And that's why actually some of the clients that you've mentioned, the customers that you mentioned, are becoming some of our clients, right? So that's what's pretty cool about what we're operating in, right? We will be the infrastructure that will fundamentally change the world looks. But beyond infrastructure, actually, we're going to go and be the person, the partner to our customers, right? We're going to be the partner to the business. We're going to be the partner to the consumer, and we're going to help them grow. So when I look at it as like, why Zuba? Like, why do you come to us? It's because I think of one thing and one thing alone that I want our customers to think about is that we care, right? The competition for us is irrelevant. our focus is our care to you. When we say that we want to be the most reliable bank in the world, we mean it. That means human touch, human care, even in the world of AI and crypto. It's about delivering when it matters. And I think that's what people care about.
Okay, sounds amazing, and I do agree. I think that where people businesses sometimes like forget that everything comes from like customers' demand in a way, right? And the pain points, which you capture really nicely. So I think I would dedicate my last part of this episode back to yourself, you as a founder, your inspiration. So let's go back to Josiah Senu and deep dive a little bit into your personality. So you founded so far 3 companies. So what did you learn? What was like 3 main things you learned about building companies?
Yeah,
Anything very specific? I want you to like be straight to the point.
yeah. I think number one is that building companies is actually all about the people.
Hmm.
So great companies are defined by the quality of people that you have around you, and the more quality people, the more you can do, and the more you can stretch. That's the hardest challenge, I think, of building a company. Second, I think, is a focus. Great companies are built, I think, by being disciplined around what you want to achieve. I think Steve Jobs said, focus is not about what you say yes to, it's about what you say no to.
Hmm.
And that's really hard in a startup. You have to
Hmm.
understand what matters, and then you have to go and absolutely kill it,
Hmm.
and win and dominate for your customer. And the third thing I would say is being obsessed.
Hmm.
I think I'm obsessed about the problem I'm solving. I'm obsessed about my customers' pain points,
Hmm.
the emotional toll that it bears on me. I think uh, people wouldn't appreciate or understand the hours I work in order to ensure that I solve that problem and I work for my customer. I think people don't have a sense of the orders of magnitude associated with that and how hard I push, because fundamentally, winning matters, right? And if I don't win, then my customer isn't helped. And that's for me at the end of the day where my joy, where my excitement comes from, and why I'm dedicated to winning. I, like, the idea that someone will outcompete me, outwork me, out hustle me for this outcome is like an alien concept to me. And when I see someone pushing against that, I do everything in my power to push against it.
That's amazing. So let's deep dive in every bit of it. So people, how do you choose candidates, or where? What's your way of learning about people? You have to have a lot of trust, like prior to speaking to a person, but you also have to mistrust and not trust everything, right? And it's like a very delicate balance. You have to inspire, but you have to check that this person is the real one, right? So, and it's so uneasy now to know whether this is a real one or not. Like, so how do you, what's your like brain work around it? Are there any tips? How do you do it?
Yeah, for sure. My Dagestani co-founder Max, who you know, he always says trust but verify, which I find to be a very good concept of engagement, and really because um, AI has equalized the playing field for a lot of people. So the only way to know someone is sharp is to spend time with them,
Hmm.
and that means working with them. So we actually have work trials where people come in and they
Hmm.
spend a couple of days, maybe a week with us,
Hmm.
and they're working on something that's live, that's critical for the
Hmm.
business,
Hmm.
and we see how they get it done. And actually,
Hmm.
we actually set impossible tasks. So we set tasks that we kind of expect you to
Hmm.
actually fail at, but we want to
Okay.
see how you
Wow.
fail. like,
Amazing. That's amazing. I read it in your article, by the way, that I mean, you do not speak failures when, if I remember it right. I mean, if you are stretched, I mean, you could not say you failed, right? If you got to a limit or beyond the limit, is it a failure? Like if you tried hard to make it under 2 hours, like your marathon distance, and you made it 2 hours and 1 minute, you failed to deliver in a way, right? But you still are in like best 3 or best 4 runners in the world, right? So if you stretched, you could not fail, right? You could only not like exactly meet your particular goal, but that is not called a failure, right? Failed is when you do something what you expect like a result upon, and you do not deliver. That might be failure, right? An accident on the road might be failure, right? But if you're a Formula One player, you could not fail. You could just a little bit under deliver.
Honestly, I resonate so much with what you're saying, because the way I would position it is that true failure for me is if you give up, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's failure,
Yeah.
right? Like but if you're persistently going against a goal, like no matter what, pushing, that's like keep going, keep it. Like uh, failure is learning. Like, it's infinite learning. You're learning to get better. You're like, uh, if my desire is to be the greatest of all time, that's an everlasting pursuit. Right? Like being the greatest of all time is like, first you get to the mountain, but then you got to stay on the mountain. You got to keep on going. You got to, how do professional athletes, the best in the world, the number one, how do they maintain that consistency again and again? It's by failure, right? Like Michael Jordan says, he's missed more game-winning shots than he's won. Roger Federer talks about losing more points than he's won, but
Oh, yeah.
like it's you got to fail to win. I kind of feel like it's a direct relationship. It's impossible to do one without the other.
So your advice is spend as much time as you can before committing, right? And give like most difficult task you can to see how this person behaves, right? How
Pretty
persistent
much.
he is, how creative he is, and look into his eyes whether he have tears because of his failure or because he tried hard and spent sleepless nights on doing this, right? Trying this. So
Exactly.
committing, yeah. And talking about discipline. So discipline is what? Can you describe it in more like discipline? You can just perceive discipline in so much different ways. So what the discipline is for you?
I think again, Max, my co-founder, is a example, in my opinion, of
Yeah.
discipline and focus, because I think because of his engineering mindset as well. I think there's like there are certain constraints that you have in order to achieve a particular goal, and how do you manage achieving the goal in the particular constraints. Therefore, you need to strip things down to their first principles, their basic orders, in order to actually get to accomplish your goal. If you're not disciplined about this, you will basically make a number of mistakes, because you'll be performing on multiple vectors of organization, and that's not a good or positive outcome for anyone. So, like, at least the way that uh, I think about it, at least the way that I have organized my mind around it, is like trying to maintain a level of focus in relation to activities. So there are 100 million things that we can do, but what is the single most important thing, such that by doing it, everything else either becomes easier or unnecessary. And once you start organizing your decisions against this matrix and this formula, you start to get actions that are much sharper and much quicker. And the discipline is about the maintenance of that principle, because there's often a whole bunch of stimuli that comes in your way, right? There's a whole bunch of things that are happening at any given one point in time. It's a startup. If that wasn't
Mhm.
happening, then are you even moving fast enough? So it's happening all the time. It's your ability to maintain the North Star, maintain the focus. Like for Max, I think I'll give a silly example, right? For him, if we say that we start work at 9 a.m., then let's make sure we're in at 9 a.m. Of course, if you have a long day, you have things that you want to get done, blah blah blah. Sure, you may come later, right, at 9:30, 9:40, but you begin to give yourself leeway. Like you begin to relax. Like no, focus. It's about your ability to do hard things, to maintain consistency, and to enable success. Michael Phelps turned up to training every day for 365 days a year, on Christmas, on New Year's, on Easter, for the 1% gain. So if you don't have discipline when you turn up, even when things are hard, how are you going to achieve success? So this is something for me which I think is so important.
Well, I can push back a little bit. My best engineers when I was a tech founder and CTO, my best engineers were not those who were amazingly disciplined. They came to the office late. Sometimes they could have spent weeks doing nothing, and even, oh my gosh, playing computer games. But I knew that they need it because they are constantly thinking through a problem and then they come up with a brilliant solution. So sometimes you need like this people who may observe a lot without doing, and then bam, done something amazing, right? So and this is not a disciplined approach, right? So you just need to have people like that as well. So how would you perceive those?
Again, I look at it as like there's micro levels and then macro levels. At a macro level, the discipline of what we do as a business really matters, right? Like the focus, the North Star, where we're going, that really matters. At the micro level, right, what does the engineer need in order for them to be successful? That's about understanding your team, right? Like if you know that John, for example, goes on these crazy benders and needs 6 weeks to come through with something which you're going to completely destroy. That's your understanding of John, but understanding of John in relation to the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? And the discipline that you have is a discipline as an organization as a macro level in order to achieve the goal. The discipline on the individual level, right? In my view, like that type of person can't exist in an early stage startup because the business can't enable that person to succeed, right? As a business
You need to
grows,
have a big organization for that.
exactly. You have many more different people, and then you can afford to have a John, who goes on a bender, and you've organized it in your system to enable success. So that's how I look at it.
Mhm. Eventually, I was an investor in Uber, and I met Travis Kalanick, founder and CEO at Uber. I think back in 2013 or so, maybe in 2012, and uh, somebody asked him at some meeting, what's like your kind of corporate culture? And Uber was already big by then. I think it was 2015 or something. It was like multi-billion-dollar company already. And he really put it very nicely. He really loved the question. He said, "Can you imagine like a corner of a total order and an opposite order corner of a total chaos, and then there is a tiny line in between, which is neither chaos nor an order, and that's where our corporate culture is. So it lies on this very tiny line, which is distinguishing both, which I really loved. I think that's exactly where we try to find the balance between like everything. But I totally agree that I loved your approach to people. I think like having a person working for you for a while on the most complex task and seeing how he fails or he or she fails, not without failing, but how like he stretched, and that exactly where you want to be with this person, right? So yeah, so my last question is back to Zuba, and I wonder how would you describe Zuba's success? So going forward, 5, 10 years, whatever horizon you put, Zuba is a successful company. What is it in words? And maybe you can give some numbers because numbers speak for themselves. So what is it?
Um, I think if people think about who they want to use as their banking platform of choice, their most reliable growth partner, the business that puts more money in their pocket than takes out of it. Um, that's how I want my customer to think about Zuba. I want us to be a business that survives for hundreds of years, doing those three things that I mentioned really well: affordable cost, um, instant settlement, reliable. Do the basics super well. I really believe in that. I think there's a huge value. It's undervalued today. Showing care, treating people as you wish to be treated. These values are so underrated in today's society. and I would want Zuba to be known for this. And then if you ask me where does that take us, I think that takes us to being a terracorn, a $1 trillion business. I think that's the minimum requirement today, especially when we see what SpaceX has done. I think
Mhm.
we will go beyond payments and banking. I think we're going to be building critical infrastructure, energy projects, roads.
Amazing.
I think we're going to be doing a lot, and I think that's what excites me.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And it was amazing discussion with one of the most talented people I met, Josiah Senu, who is a founder at Zuba, my friend. And this was a podcast, Ventures from the Valley, brought to you by R136. And I'm Victor Orlovski. Thank you, Josiah. It was a really amazing discussion. Love it.
Thanks for having me, Victor. It was a pleasure.